Welcome everyone to the Acctivate webinar featuring Noobeh, the private cloud for small businesses. Noobeh is brought to us by Mendelson. Mendelson has been a long time partner of Acctivate. They work in consulting, helping our mutual customers get up and running with Acctivate, also with any additional things, custom integrations, things like that. So I have Mario and Joni here with us, and Mario is going to present Noobeh for us. Mario?
Hello, Eva. Thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you. And we're going to be speaking about what this private cloud for small business is all about. First off, very quick, just time for a very quick introduction about who I am. I'm the founder and the principal of Mendelson Consulting. Noobeh is a division of Mendelson Consulting. Our company has been around for now almost 30 years. And Noobeh is the cloud services division of Mendelson. Our firm is headquartered in South Florida, but the majority of our work nowadays happens on a national basis and some of it even international. So you can read more about that here. You can read a lot of this on your own. We were the founding member, I like to call it, of the Quickbooks Solution Provider Program. I am personally, my name is Mario Nobogrodsky. I guess that was, what Eva introduced me as, and I'm part of the Quickbooks Enterprise Product Council. I help shape the QuickBooks Enterprise software and current and future roadmaps. We are actually Activate's oldest partner, not by age, even though I may not be that young. I'm still not maybe the oldest partner in age, but we're one of the oldest solution provider partner that Acctivate has had. We go back so long that we know how to spell Acctivate the old way with the capital ACCT. And those of you who have known Acctivate long enough, you'll know what I mean. Back a few years ago. More about our team. I'll introduce myself. Keith Felicia. He is our main person when it comes to our consulting business. He's our COO, the company's COO, and he handles most, if not all, of the consulting work as it pertains to Acctivate work. Joni Mann, my associate, is present at this webinar. She'll be handling the panelist duties, so all of your questions, Q&A, will be handled mostly by her. I'll answer whatever questions come up during the presentation as best I can, but she's manning the board as best as possible. So thank you, Joni, for that participation. And of course, Dakota. We couldn't do anything with Acctivate without Dakota. Dakota is our main person as it pertains to all the business we do with the fine folks at Acctivate. I like to say that more than our team, more important than us is our supporting cast. And they're listed there in order of arrival, not alphabetical order of arrival at our company. Some of our team members have been with us now, I think, almost 15 years. Our tenure ranges between 10 and 15 years for the most people that you see there. And that's what makes us a successful team. Last piece of logistics, before we get into the actual subject matter, I call it logistics. Some people call it housekeeping when it comes to webinars. We're going to be together for the better part of 60 minutes. Please, more than whatever I'm speaking of or presenting, if you have questions, type them in the questions panel, please. I'd rather stop in the middle of what I'm saying, answer a question if it's pertinent to the matter, and if it's not pertinent, we'll deal with it at the end. We'll have time for Q&A, hopefully, and if not, my associate Joni will also type in the answer. So please don't let a question go unanswered, unasked, I should say. We do not let a question go unanswered. Please don't let a question go unasked. Ask all your questions as it pertains to cloud. So what we're going to be speaking about today, the majority of the time, you're going to be learning about why cloud. It is presented as officially. It is not a secret that we are a cloud services company now, besides the main consulting firm that we are, and this is what we're going to be speaking of for the next several minutes, is based on experience, I'm going to say personal experience, maybe not personally of my own, me, Mario, but personal of our consulting team as it pertains for the last 20 plus years, and personal of our cloud services team that we had now for several years. And we'll be speaking about each of these topics and explaining why each of these is a reason why to go to the cloud. We will then segue and explain better the concept of how is private cloud that much better than the traditional cloud services you're all accustomed to. We're going to be speaking about anytime, anywhere access, how that works for you, how what we are working with today, doesn't matter what device it is, what type of computer or mobile device, it's device agnostic. We'll be speaking about real-time collaboration. One of the highlights to me is the adaptability and scalability. Stay tuned for that. You'll be impressed. Affordable, predictable costs. It's always, the cost factor is always there, so you'll know about that. How there's improved security. In case of recovery or disaster recovery, there's business continuity concerns, and how to be green with it. So to start off, here's some interesting statistics that I found over the last year. And some of these, I'll let you read these, let you read these on your own, but I'm going to just highlight and point a few. And a few too many people think that stormy weather has an effect on cloud computing. Okay. Now, even though that may sound funny and it's really not true, there is some truth to it in that stormy weather may affect your physical location of where you're sitting or working at, so therefore your access to your work may be affected. But the actual static cloud is always there. Weather doesn't affect it. Some people think that the cloud is a place to store, access, and share data. That's correct. Okay, and that's the gist of what we're going to be speaking of. Cloud computing, just to dispel any rumors or any funny comments, has nothing to do with weather. And then it's not meant to be funny, because there's a lot of folks out there who have some inclination to think that there's something physically in the sky. No, there's nothing. Nothing's up in the cloud. Nothing's weather related. So a lot of us, I was going to say a lot of you, a lot of us have used the cloud in some respect, some form of another. 95% of people have actually used cloud, but don't really know that they have. The majority of the work that we're involved in today, the majority of our interactions, our purchases, our sales, our consumption, somewhere, somehow, there's cloud involved, whether you know it or whether you like it or not. Do you have to give up your desktop applications, your desktop software? And by that, I'm speaking of the best example of all, which is Quickbooks or Quickbooks Enterprise and Acctivate desktop software, versus software as a service. Software as a service is something like some of you may know about QuickBooks Online, or there's several other accounting software providers like Xero, and there's a few others as well, Microsoft Dynamics, that they are truly, completely cloud-based, software as a service. You log onto a website, put in your user, your password, and you are. It's just browser-based. There's a distinct difference. The majority of software as a service, as far as the QuickBooks realm is concerned, I'm going to be very, very blunt here. QuickBooks Online and the related add-ons to QuickBooks Online, which are truly software as a service, cloud-based, web browser-based, are nowhere nearly as robust as QuickBooks Desktop, specifically QuickBooks Enterprise Desktop, and even more when you put Enterprise plus Acctivate. The combination of that, and this is not meant to be an advertisement for Acctivate or QuickBooks, it's a reality, it's a fact. QuickBooks Online versus QuickBooks Desktop. So if you really want to be in the cloud at all costs, you do not need to downgrade to a software as a service model such as QuickBooks Online. And I'm using very specific words. I said downgrade, not in a demeaning way. It is a true fact. Everyone that is involved with QuickBooks Desktop will tell you that going to QuickBooks Online is a downgrade. Do not need to do that. You can stay with QuickBooks Desktop and still go to the cloud. And we're about to learn how and why. So cloud gives you, well, this is one of the obvious ones, but it's always worth mentioning, anytime, anywhere access. Nice picture of someone at the beach working on a laptop. working on whatever it is remotely onto, more likely a cloud server, anytime, anywhere access. It's a good thing. Sometimes it's a bad thing because that means that you're connected to work all the time. So that the work-life balance comes into play, and we're not going to get into that. That's not what the subject matter of this seminar is. But in today's reality of work, it is almost a necessity. We were just at a client as recently as yesterday doing a consulting job in QuickBooks and inventory, and the owner was saying how they would really like to have a cloud server so that their employees, his key person who's the controller, could work from home whenever she needed to, as opposed to having to come to work every day to the office. And that would be the advantage, not just from home, from anywhere. She's traveling, vacation, not vacation, can connect to work. So anytime, anywhere access is a key one, and it's the first one, easy one to understand. Device agnostic. The platform that we work with, this private cloud platform, and there's no secret, there's no letting the cat out of the bag. We work specifically on the Microsoft Azure platform. That's what the Noobeh services are about. We put in Quickbooks, put in Acctivate on a Azure server. The advantage of the cloud server accessibility is that it is device agnostic. You can connect from any device, from your regular desktop computer, from your mobile phone. That's an interesting picture there. This is all stock photography, you can tell. But interesting picture there of a BlackBerry. I guess those are still around. I'm not gonna, smartphones, iPhones, Android, etc. A laptop, a Surface. I happen to use a Microsoft Surface of 3 different types. One I have for the road, one I have as my home computer, which I plug into a docking station, and so on. And I really almost don't carry anything physically in my Surface. Maybe I do sync some documents down because I'm going to be working on some article writing on a flight, on a plane. There might not be internet, so okay, so I get that. But other than that, I am always, and in fact, the majority of the time I try to use an airplane's internet because that's where my real work is. And that way I don't have to install, when the new Quickbooks comes out, which it just came out, by the way, 2020 Quickbooks just came out, we have to install it on our cloud server, of course, and that's pretty much it. I did not install it, and I will not install it in my laptop, travel laptop, my Surface. Because why? I'm going to be working on it only when I'm connecting to my cloud server. Even if I'm working with a client, even if I'm doing test work, demo work, sample work, doesn't matter. I'm not going to be installing anything locally. Everything I do is centralized on a cloud server. That's why it's device agnostic. And yes, you can run things out of a phone, albeit me in my age, and I'm giving away a little bit of my age older, a phone is a little small to look at a screen, but it can work there. Preferably a laptop, an iPad, it can work there. Real-time collaboration. Another one of these easy to understand, much like the anytime, anywhere access concept. No matter where you are sitting or working from, real-time collaboration, real-time work, our team, the people on this phone call, we have a few of our team members connected as attendees here, as well as besides Joni and myself. Even Joni and myself are sitting in completely different opposite sides of the country. Okay, I think I could easily say, like I told a client yesterday, I'm in one corner of the country in South Florida, and Joni is in the other corner in Northwest Washington. So, and we work together all the time, every day, probably every single minute or at least every single hour, easily, because we're working centralized out of one cloud server. Adaptability and scalability. I told you this is one of my favorite areas to speak about, and because we have some actual stories, anecdotes to speak about, which I will, and we have some, that to me, one of the highlights of working with Microsoft Azure and a server on Azure. First of all, by definition, adaptability, the ability to change to fit altered circumstances. Okay, I didn't make this is an actual dictionary definition. Why we chose several years ago the Azure platform with Microsoft, because on that platform, we can change and adapt our server to fit the needs that we need in that moment, in that instant. We could increment or decrement server resources. I'm speaking about CPU, memory, even hard drive, anything of the sort. We can just make a few clicks on the parameters, on the configuration, click restart on the server, and less than 8 minutes later, it could be as soon as 2 minutes later, our server is now, in theory, a new server with different hardware with all the same exact applications and systems as before. Nothing's been reinstalled. We're just changing the hardware parameters that are being used. We get charged by the usage, by the consumption. So if we do a hire of certain maybe seasonal employees and we need more power on the server, this is not a per user charge, by the way. This is a server. I need a server with more oomph, with more power, more RAM, so I can run more applications in there. Well, I up it. I will pay a little bit more in consumption, sure. And when my season is over and I am down to the regular lower needs, I downgrade and I pay less. You can get extremely granular in that adaptability. You can make it where, let's say I decide that we do not work, our server for sure will not be on from 12 midnight to 6 a.m. Forget about time zones, doesn't matter for the purpose of this conversation. And we will not pay, and we can actually have it automatically have the server turned off and on at those times and not pay for a quarter day's consumption. This is all in theory. Probably, more than likely, one of our team members is going to work in the middle of the night. Sometimes yours truly does that. My team members know that, and sometimes my own team members, do that. It's not unusual, especially in the kind of business that we work with. But there are some businesses where that can happen, that can be done. Another example, here's an actual real life true example that we went through with a client several months ago, maybe it was a year ago. One of the clients that we have in Noobeh on Quickbooks on an Azure server, they use QuickBooks Enterprise and they use a reporting utility, a reporting add-on. It's a very, very small user base. I think it's a 1 or 2 user client. I think it's a 4-user QuickBooks, but only two people ever get into it. So we put them on the, let's call it on the most minimal, smallest possible server, enough that will support the QuickBooks for 1 user and the reporting utility. With that said, when we went to install that reporting utility, that software, the installer routine of the software, checks for the system, the hardware on that server. And it was too small to support it. So it said installation failed. It would not install. We incremented the CPU and RAM enough to satisfy the requirements of the installer of that software. And then minutes later, once it was installed, we decremented it back to being the baseline server for this 1 user or 2 user company. Software works perfectly. All we did was increment for the few minutes it needed to install, decrement it back down. Client never knew that it happened. They didn't have to pay for it. It cost us pennies to do that. That's the adaptability that this affords you. You do not have to buy a more robust server and pay for that. You do not need it for 99% of the time. And the last thing I'm going to say about this is, in the old days, and I make it sound funny, in the old days, until the advent of cloud servers existed, and we ourselves changed to the cloud server. I'm going to interject a little bit of our own story. We implemented our own server in the cloud on Azure about 3 years ago, give or take. Maybe it was a little more. And then it was so successful, and we were so happy. We moved our QuickBooks Enterprise. We have a CRM that is desktop-based, server-based. We have a timesheet software that's desktop-based. We have a reporting utility that is desktop-based. We moved all of that and all our documents and folders to this cloud server. We were so successful with it. It was so smooth that I said to my team, why can't we do this for clients? And no reason why not. And therefore, a couple months later, the Noobeh division was born. Because now we said we can offer the same thing to clients, and we did. Why it's all our story? Because of how easy it was for us to change over, and that back to the adaptability. One of the things I like is that we can have more or less power on the server. We then decided to build another server. Yes, it costs money. There's a subscription fee to pay for another server on our Azure platform because we want a very powerful server that our consultants use that is not our operations daily QuickBooks server for their data activities, for doing work with clients that need support on, let's say, Acctivate. We'll bring their Acctivate file in there. QuickBooks files that need a new QuickBooks file or data repair, we do it all in there. We call that internally the workhorse server. In fact, that's the name we give it when we refer to it internally. So, and that server goes off and on. It's a very super powerful server that would cost us a lot of money if it was on all the time. But we only have it on when needed. If we know that one of our consultants is going to use it for a weekend, well, then we plan for it and have it on from Friday, whatever time, until the project's finished, usually on a Monday or early on the week, and then it goes off again. So that adaptability is another example. I have a lot more examples, but I don't want to get stuck on just this topic alone. So we'll move on. Affordable, predictable cost. That ties a little bit into what we just were speaking about. The true price, the true cost of a server on Azure, on the Microsoft Azure cloud, is a cost per consumption. The bigger the server, it's not a cost per user. No, even though you could do the math and divide by number of users and here's your cost, but it's not like one user is going to cost you X amount of money. No, it's a cost per server. This is a cost per environment. And you know what the cost is going to be going in. Because we predict it. We interview the client and we say, based on the apps you have and the size of your Acctivate file and your QuickBooks file and whatever other applications you're going to need and what file folders and storage you need, here's the server that we recommend for you from Microsoft. And that's what we started on. We may have to bump you up or bump you down depending on need from month to month, but there's a predictable cost. Just so you know, when I say we will put you on a recommended server, there's more than 1,500, and I'm sure I'm underestimating, Joni may correct me in this, more than 1,500 permutations, combinations of possible servers that we could deploy for a client because of the options that Microsoft gives between number of CPUs, number of processors, CPUs, amount of RAM, combination, type of processor, et cetera, type of RAM. There's a lot of, the type of hard drive, how many hard drives, SSD, not SSD, big, small. There's a lot of combinations, and then we do the heavy work on that. You don't have to make the choice. We do that with you. Another thing that we work with you, with the client, that affects the cost sometimes, but usually very minimally or nothing, is when I said that the permutations are 1,500 or more. Also, as far as the location of your server, we're speaking about you're going to be working on a Microsoft, your server is located physically, in case you're wondering, at one of Microsoft's worldwide data centers, and there's many all over the world. There's several actually on the East Coast of the US, Mid, Central, South, West, Northwest, there's several, and of course spread around the world as well. We put you on, by our mutual choice with the client, of course, on the server of your choice. Maybe you're located in the East Coast and you want distributed risk, so you want to be put on a server that's in the West Coast, or vice versa, or it's your choice. There's always the possibility of failover or fallover, I don't know which is the right word, where if the data center were to go down, which I've never heard of, by the way, then you are moved over to the next available one. There's a lot of ways to make it work where you are never down. It is impossible for your server access to not exist. Your internet, your electricity might go down, something goes off, you drive up to the next place that has internet, you're back on the server. So the Microsoft data center, the actual subscription price that we work out, the predictable cost, is affected sometimes, like I said, minimally by which region the server is located at, but most of the time it's about the same cost or a minimal difference. Something else that this reminded me of, now I'm speaking on the subject of data centers. I don't know if this is going to come up in one of my next slides. I don't remember, but I'll say it now. Like I said a couple of minutes ago, Microsoft has data centers all over the world. We have a priority support contract with Microsoft that we pay for, that you don't have to pay for. Basically, it's an insurance policy. And their locations all over the world includes one location that is physically underwater, off of the coast of Scotland, Microsoft several years ago decided to try this new concept of a data center. And all it is this just submerged data center underwater, and actually it's the one with the least amount of maintenance needed of any data center in the world because it requires less cooling thanks to the water. Again, it's a long-term test, but it's working out very well. So that's an interesting concept, and it's public information. It's not secret. You can look it up online. It's called Project Natick. Quite interesting. N-A-T-I-C-K. Improved information technology security. I like this picture. This actually happened to a client of ours. A cleaning person comes after hours, knocks off the server, the power of the server. All of a sudden, all work that was planned for the weekend was lost. You know, just impossible to be done. Everyone was going to connect remote into the office, to the server, to this office server, and impossible because power was disconnected. That's just one instance. I'm sure it's happened thousands of times or more than that to a lot of people, and that's what this picture depicts. Information technology security doesn't just mean access to intrusion security and so on. It's actually physical. So this is impossible to happen. Nobody can unplug your switch or your internet router or your server from your office. There is no such thing. It's all physically in the cloud in a Microsoft data center. So that information, that the physical security is taken care of. The difference between this and a typical traditional shared hosting environment, and we're going to get into some visuals that you'll see what I'm about to explain much better. Some of you may be thinking, okay, what about information security, like intrusion, malware, viruses, ransomware, and it gets even worse than that. Also near impossible, because you're not going to be affected by your next door neighbor. In a shared environment, in a shared hosting environment, everyone is actually using the same server or set of servers. In each of our clients' particular case, that's not the case. Everyone gets their own separate Microsoft account on Azure with their own separate server. It does not matter that another Microsoft customer that is not ours, of course, gets infected, gets ransomware, whatever. First of all, it's a lot less likely for that to happen, but if it were to happen, it's the same as if your next door neighbor gets affected by a virus. Nothing happens to you. You're in your own house. You're not in a shared apartment sharing rooms. That's what a shared environment is about. So there's even much more improved security when it comes to compared to a shared environment. Now, I said earlier that our headquarters office, where I am standing right now, I'm in South Florida. You all know what South Florida is. Come June 1st, actually June 1st through November 30th, we're right in the midst of it, hurricane season. And it's not just South Florida. It's a lot of the south of the U.S., even the East Coast. Happens every year. We all get warned. We always get surprised, not surprised at all. We always get warnings when hurricanes come. No effect on what we're speaking of. Since we moved our server to the cloud, I'm speaking of our own experience, of course, and the same of all of our other clients, there's nothing to do when there's no hurricane preparedness anymore. This happened. This is not made up. Earlier this month, beginning of September, there was a storm that was coming our way. And in all preparations and so on, we were, clients were calling in, what do we do? There's really nothing to do if your server is in the cloud. There's minimal to do or nothing to do. My own office administrator comes to me, we're wrapping up for the day, we're all gonna leave for the weekend. She says, what do we do about the storm? And I said, well, what do you wanna do? There's nothing we gotta do. She said, so do we have to unplug things, lift things? Well, you can lift your computer from the floor if you want, it doesn't matter. If the place gets flooded, all right, so we'll buy a new computer, big deal. There's absolutely no chance, zero, absolute chance of software or data loss because everything, our livelihood is up in a cloud server. Compared to the old days, the reason she came to ask me is because when we used to prepare for hurricanes here in South Florida in our office, there was some extreme preparations. We would have to unplug the server, lift it up. There was a server, there was no more server here in the office. One of us had to take a physical backup with us to our home, to our house. No, there's some stuff to do. Maybe not a lot, but there's some stuff to do. No more of that. It's all up in the cloud. Even our backups are in the cloud, in a different cloud. Not, by the way, there's a backup on the Microsoft cloud, and there's a backup that we keep separately. So every one of our clients has multiple backups, including external to Microsoft. So they have distributed security that way. And by the way, I'm speaking about hurricanes, and of course, you understand this applies to any type of natural disaster, not just hurricanes. Sometimes clients ask, well, what if a hurricane comes? What if a hurricane hits my building? Okay, well, you probably have worse problems to worry about. You know, if you don't have power, that's a problem all by itself. Forget about internet, forget about cloud. The advantage of a cloud server using Azure is that you can just drive up to the next place that has internet and you're back to work. Fully work, nothing to restore, nothing to restart. Your server was never down. That's the difference. That's a special thing. And that speaks about business continuity. One of the last points as far as the why cloud is, I call it, well, if anything, people move to the cloud to be green, to be more green. And you might say, well, how is that more green? How am I saving the environment by going to the cloud? Watch this. Listen to this. The concept of cloud computing, and this goes above and beyond just Microsoft and Azure, just cloud computing, is in and of itself more environmentally friendly. Why? Because imagine your computer, not cloud, your computer, your desktop computer, your on-premise server is being utilized, let's say maybe 8 hours a day, maybe 12 hours. Let's just exaggerate a little bit. What happens to the other 12 hours? Well, it's dormant, doing nothing. While the other side of the world, there's people working those 12 hours. Okay? What if those people were to use your computer in the meantime? Now, it's not a specific that. Nobody's logging into your computer, so no worries about that. I'm speaking about the computing power of a data center. The data center means that there's physical hardware that's being used for other purposes when you're not using it. Your data is safe, obviously. Your programs are safe. Nothing's being touched as far as your hard drives go, nothing at all. But the computing power is being repurposed for where it is needed. That's the concept of green computing. It's not a Microsoft Azure specific. Anybody and everyone that's in the cloud is subject to this. That's why, again, I repeat for the third or fourth time, there's more environmentally friendliness, more, if you want to call it, social consciousness when it comes to cloud computing. Okay. So now it's time to embrace the cloud. Now that you know the several points of why the cloud, embrace the cloud and grow your business with your own server in the cloud. Again, a lot of businesses decide to use a server not of your own in the cloud, a shared environment, a shared server. And that's what we're going to speak of and dispel today in the next part of the conversation. I'm going to hone in on QuickBooks on Azure, or specifically even more, QuickBooks and Acctivate on Azure. And that is the core business that Noobeh is about. Running QuickBooks and the related applications such as Acctivate on Microsoft Azure enables you to accelerate the speed of doing business. Anywhere, anytime access, you already know about that, with the flexibility of the cloud. Your business now focuses more on the customer experiences, on what really counts in your business, on what I call the top line of the P&L, the revenue end, while streamlining and basically having peace of mind, just off of mind, anything has to do with infrastructure and technology. That is really the path to digital transformation. We actually teach a separate class. It has nothing to do with this. It has a lot more to do with QuickBooks and technology, and not even nothing to do with cloud, on digital transformation of today. And that's at the core concept. Businesses should not have to worry or think about their own infrastructure, and that's what happens when they go to a private cloud on Azure. All they concentrate on is operations and the revenue producing activities. Why private cloud versus shared server in the cloud? And when I say shared server, let me be specific while you soak in this picture, pun intended, of course, is would you rather be working here? Is this where you would like to spend your time, you know, working or having fun? This is just a picture of people in a public pool, not to say other things, but there's a lot of stuff going on here that you may not be comfortable with, including cleanliness, including possible disease, possible infections, viruses, malware, et cetera, et cetera. Now I'm speaking computer terms, of course. Would you rather be having fun here, or would you rather spend your time here? Both get you in the sun, both probably get you to the water, right? One is a lot more cleaner and comfortable and safe and secure than the other. That's an exact comparison between a public shared hosting provider, which a lot of you may be familiar with. Well, there's a lot of QuickBooks shared hosting providers. This is not what we do. We deal with private cloud, private server on your own Microsoft Cloud, private seats on your own private beach, right? Would you rather go to work in a crowded bus like this, or would you prefer this method of transportation? Would you rather go to work in this? Again, both get you there. One obviously a lot faster than the other. With one you can do whatever you want in, just be in the car, versus the public bus. The analogy, to be overly express about it, is you can install whatever you want in the server that's of your own in the cloud, including QuickBooks and Acctivate and whatever other desktop applications you want, versus a public shared server where you cannot install whatever you want. You're always limited. Either you're limited by the physical limitations that they don't allow you because of safety, security, etc., or because they charge you more for each application that you want to install. Not the case with your own private server on Azure. And that's what this is the premise. Acctivate plus QuickBooks, basically running on your own Microsoft Azure account. And I keep stressing, it's your own account. We are a Microsoft Direct partner. We're a partner company of Microsoft. We get more advantageous pricing on Azure subscriptions than anyone else. So we bundle that in with our managed service and provide you that service. That's the concept. That's the premise specifically of the Noobeh service. But it is still your own account. We provision an account for you on Azure. You can, in theory, take the ball and run with it if you want one day and not be managed by us anymore. It's still your account to take. Just like when you buy a server, you call up Dell Computer Company and say, hey, I want a server that, with these specs, you buy it, it gets delivered to you. The difference, of course, between buying a Dell server and buying a Microsoft Azure server is that if one day you do not need the particular server specs that you just bought last month, well, you cannot unbuy it. You bought it with all this much RAM, all this much memory, all these CPUs. You cannot unbuy it, whereas you can, yes, you can unbuy it if you have an Azure server. You can adjust it up or down, like we said earlier. The QuickBooks on Azure servers that we build, that we put for you, are custom built with all the software you require. The best example, and we have several clients in this environment with QuickBooks and Acctivate running. Like I said before, comparing this to traditional shared hosting is like comparing a private beach to a public pool and an electric car to a crowded bus. And by the way, the electric car, imagine if that electric car was also adaptable, where you could just convert it into an electric pickup truck or electric big rig. You could do that and then bring it back to be a car when you don't need the big rig anymore. When does a private cloud make sense for running QuickBooks and Acctivate on Azure? You get remote access to QuickBooks Desktop and all your applications. If you have an aging internal server, you have high IT costs, I always say to our clients, I predict, just like it happened to us, I predict that everyone's next on-premise server is not a server anymore. It's going to be a server in the cloud. There'll be less and less people buying on-premise servers and more people moving to a server in the cloud. There is no doubt that what we went through is the best experience there is. It is massively scalable. You've heard me speak about it a lot. You run QuickBooks Desktop, all your add-ons, and in the case of us, with Noobeh, it is a managed service. Our management team, our IT team, is there to manage all aspects of it, from onboarding all the way through support and any applications that you need to add as well, or add and remove. Fun fact, what does Noobeh means? It's the phonetic pronunciation of the word nube, which means in Latin and in Spanish, it means the word cloud. So at the very least, you learn a new word in Spanish and in Latin today. So Noobeh is not an app, it's not something you buy, it's not something you install. There's no shared anything, there's no software as a stuck in between, no. What Noobeh is discrete, tailored, actual cloud servers for small business running on Microsoft Azure. Another fun fact, this whole PowerPoint that I'm speaking over, I'm running directly on our cloud server, and you could not tell the difference. I worked on this PowerPoint while on the cloud server, saved it in the cloud server, and running from the cloud server. Why? So I could be running this from my office, which is where I'm standing today, or I could have been doing this from home, or I could be doing this from the road. Yeah, granted, my office, I have my own phone, my headset, all that. Obviously, it's a better place for me to do it, but it's accessible anywhere. And this is why, and I'm, again, full disclosure, this is why my associates Keith and Joni had a lot to do and a lot to say about this PowerPoint, because they got to see it live while I was working on it. And when Acctivate asked me to update, for example, and actually this is true, I asked them, hey, can you send me a picture of, I didn't have a current picture of Dakota, our account partner manager over at Acctivate. We were live on our server, and they sent me a picture, and they saw me live actually putting it in the PowerPoint. So the advantage is limitless. I want to thank you for the attention to this. Hopefully you learned not just something, but a lot of new concepts. Let me see if there's any questions I can help answer on the Q&A. There's some questions on technical support. I see that you answered, Joni. Virtual servers, Azure instance, thank you. Separate cloud QuickBooks accounts required. So one person asked, is a separate cloud QuickBooks account required? The answer is no. No, and this is actually an important and good question. If you have your own QuickBooks software, which most of you already do, you bring your software with you. If you have your own Microsoft Office software, your Word, your Excel, your Outlook, you bring it with you. You don't have to pay again for it. You bring your own software. This is your server to which you're going to bring your existing software. It is akin to you taking your existing internal server that is now today sitting in your Office server closet, taking that exact server, unplugging it, and shooting it up to the cloud. It's exactly the same thing. That's the concept. There's a question on Acctivate and SQL. I think that Joni is better equipped, and you did answer that, so thank you for that, because that's you're much better than I am on answering that. Do all Acctivate modules work with the cloud and FedEx and mobile functions? So the answer is yes. Everything that you run your full Acctivate. John is asking, can you run all your modules? Yes, all of the Acctivate modules have been proven and tested to work on the cloud server. Remember, there's very minimal or no difference between a cloud server. You're running Windows Server the same way you run Windows Server on your local computer. Some of the hardware may require different connectivity because now it's cloud, but it's the same idea. Question by Len, how the integration would be with the shipping system be set up or be affected? It would not be affected. I'm going to say that question is better probably. Do you want to help answer that? I mean, Eva, is that something you can help answer?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So the integration with your shipping systems is essentially done via an ODBC connection. With your Acctivate service in the cloud, or your Acctivate application in the cloud, essentially all we need to do is make sure that we're in the same network with your shipping systems as well. So if you have UPS or FedEx, we would install those applications in the cloud as well. And then they would be able to talk to each other via that ODBC connection very easily. And then any printing of labels that you need to do, that part is set up via the remote services that we're doing to actually log into the cloud. And we've seen this done many times. So yeah, it really doesn't change much.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Eva. Thank you. Jason, I see a question about, you're asking about another Acctivate, another online shared hosting provider, InSync to be specific. They recently were hit with ransomware and they were down for quite a bit, affecting a lot of people. We know about it. We felt it. We have a lot of clients that, or I should say, companies who were not our clients who came to us because of that. I'm going to ask. I can say a few things, but Eva, you say something, and then I might ask Joni to say a word about that. How? I'm first going to say that it's physically impossible to happen because InSync is a shared environment. One customer gets affected, then all their servers get affected. It's impossible for this to happen across multiple Microsoft accounts. Everyone is an independent account. Okay. So Eva, do you want to say something about that question on InSync?
The only thing I can say for that, really, for specific to Acctivate itself, is that with InSync specifically, essentially the install of Acctivate is such that everybody pretty much has the same install. So if one of the Acctivate companies is affected, they're all affected, essentially. And so that's why we saw such a big hit when the InSync instance happened. With what they're talking about with Noobeh, it's essentially your own server. You are not sharing anything with anybody.
Yeah, you're correct. It's your own install. You know, even
Yes.
if there's two clients, and here's a good example. Even if there's two businesses that are running Acctivate the exact identical way with the same modules and same number of users, of course, different license number. If there's two different businesses, even if they're the exact same Acctivate modules and licenses, it's still two separate installs on their own individual server. There's no way we could save anything and install it once and have it work for both. It's physically impossible with Azure. That's not the architecture. The architecture that InSync and the other shared hosting providers use is exactly that. It is shared because they install once and deploy it to all their customers. And this is another reason, by the way, sidebar, another reason why some applications are being pulled, not Acctivate, of course, but other applications are being pulled from the shared hosting providers. Why? Because if one customer is using version, let's say 5 of whatever, XYZ software, another company is using version 6 of XYZ software, another company is using version 7 of XYZ software. Well, the moment that the shared hosting provider installs version 7 for that last customer, then everyone gets it. Then the people that didn't pay for 6 or 7 are getting it. And that's not right. You cannot do that. Software companies are now pulling from being available on such shared hosting environment because they cannot, the licensing is not conducive to it. So that's the difference between what we're speaking of, which is private. Again, it's your own install. If there's 3 different customers using version 5 and 6 and 7 of different software, so it's 3 different servers anyway. They can coexist because one does not see the other. Okay. Joni, is there something you want to add? You can say yes, no, or nothing if you want, as far as the InSync incident or any of that you can add.
Yeah, and actually, this isn't really specific to InSync. It kind of speaks to hosting infrastructure in general. And James Espy, this will kind of address your recovery plan question also. So in the shared infrastructure in most commercial hosting environments, even when a provider says, we've given you a, your own virtual private server or a dedicated server or something like that, there's still a common thread amongst all of those servers. There's an Active Directory or domain controls, that are connecting the machines and, securing them for permission purposes and all of that other kind of stuff. There are backup servers that are connected to the various computers. So even though there might be a certain amount of, I'll put it in air quotes, privacy on the platform, there are still shared aspects. And it's that sharing that creates the vulnerability. If you've got one user with the wrong kind of permission who gets something icky on their session, that has the ability to, wheedle its way through domain controllers, through backup servers, throughout the network. And that's exactly what happened at InSync. It happened at Cloud9. It happened at Skyline and CTROM. And virtually every shared platform has that vulnerability. I mean, the bad guys are pretty smart, and the malware can do a lot of interesting things, like jump across virtual machines in a VMware environment. So, when you've got smart engineers, granted, trying to manage hardware and data centers and network security and virtualization and all of these things, that's an awful lot to try to pay attention to. And it's really kind of the product of our learning. I mean, I worked with InSync. I've worked with a lot of these hosting platforms. And over time, the technology has evolved and the bad guys and their technology have evolved, but a lot of the platforms have not. And that's specifically one of the reasons why we work with the Microsoft Azure, and even more specifically, why we do only private tenant hosting, which means we're not relying on our skills to make sure that your systems are secured from other people on the platform. We have way smarter people than that working on that, and that would be Microsoft. They're ensuring privacy and everything. They're managing the hardware, they're managing the data centers, and they're doing it at levels that we could never possibly, conceive of doing it ourselves. So the only thing we're focusing on is your specific delivery. And that's one of the reasons why we take certain precautions to secure your delivery as best as we can. We don't connect you to any, shared Active Directories or domain controllers or anything like that. In fact, in a lot of cases, we'll even keep your cloud server separate from your Office 365 authentication, just so that if one login method fails, you've still got the other one that works.
Joni, I'm going to answer some. I'm going to ask you for an opinion on something. I just saw a question by Jason and also James, another question.
Sure.
I'm going to kind of combine the two questions. Jason, you're asking about how we mentioned this is a private cloud. Does it mean that you could have the power, you could have power users with enough admin permissions to install software, to change printer drivers? The short answer is yes. Okay. The longer answer is we recommend that not, just to prevent you from trouble. But if you absolutely have to have, we say, well, here are the keys. This is your server after all, right? So that's one short answer, and I can ask you to comment. But before that, Joni, James, you're asking, it's a private server. You could get hit on your own private server because of one of your own users, carelessness, let's say. What's the recovery plan at Noobeh for something like this? The recovery, luckily, knock on wood, and however you want to call it, we never had to execute such a disaster recovery. But a recovery is not days or weeks. You agree, Joni?
Yeah, I mean, the truth of it is that when something like that happens, it's happening to one organization, one environment. So we're not faced with a scenario where we're trying to recover hundreds of servers and thousands of customers, and your data is just somewhere, amongst everybody else's in the backup. We've got one system to focus on.
Right.
You know, but the ability to recover that environment, because we're running on the Azure platform, is very, very rapid. I mean, we have the ability to spin up a new server. We've got a snapshot of your server after its last configuration, so we can recover the virtual machine very quickly. In terms of backups, we're not only backing up to the Azure storage platform, and you know, we've got restore points that are, you know, 180 days, you know, 52 weeks, 36 months, you know, 7 years,
And
depending
to
on
John's point, or John's question, how often is, like, besides the restore points, how often is
well, we're backing up nightly to the Azure cloud. But in addition to that, we also have a secondary backup that's going to a private secure vault for you on Backblaze, which is another secure cloud, which is
yeah, that's a separate, completely separate non-Microsoft resource that we use, that we make sure that we separate, we distribute the risk that way. Yes.
Well, and one of the properties of the secondary backup is that we always place a, we'll call it a bait file, on the operating system drive, the C drive of the cloud server. And before we run the nightly secondary backup, we test that bait file to make sure it hasn't been altered, encrypted, or changed in any way. If it has, that secondary backup will not run. And that means we're protecting, you know, the archived data in the vault from potentially being impacted, you know, by something that might be going on the cloud server. So, you know, we're running the backups every single night. We have multiple restore points, but we're also testing the system to make sure that there hasn't been any encryption on that drive, you know, before we potentially compromise that secondary backup.
Yeah, to add to that concept, I'm gonna make a bit of a, what do I call it, a soapbox comment on that. That practice that you just described, Joni, is not, should not be, and is not invented because of cloud computing. That practice of safeguarding the backups, no, don't back up something that's infected, obviously, because then your restore will be infected. That's not new. That's something that you, the client, the customers, you all users should already be implementing, and if you're not, your IT person should be implementing. So that's something that we ensure because we know that's the right way of doing it, but that's not something invented because of cloud computing. It's just more easily handled, yes, because of cloud computing and cloud backups, a lot easier. So just be mindful that we're not giving here new concepts, we're not inventing new concepts. Just be aware about that. Jason, you're asking the question, and I'll let Joni, I'll say it, and then Joni, you come in and say, the question about the example of the FedEx Ship Manager. You require periodic updates. You're spending too much time waiting 2 days for a support call to do the quick 30-second update. In theory, yes, if it's something that simple, we could hand that over to you for you to do. You don't have to wait for anybody. Joni, you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I would. You know, of course I would. That's how I roll. So, you know, frequently our clients are wanting administrative privileges to do whatever. Generally, it's a software update, printer install, you know, some goofy thing like that. But we also recognize that if we give you elevated permissions and you're just, you know, going through your daily course of business, you represent a big vulnerability on your system. Because if you've got elevated privileges and you inadvertently, you know, click on the bad thing, that means that you have the permissions to let the bad thing go active and do damage on the system. So what we will typically do is we'll create an administrative user, and you know, we'll give you the credentials to that Windows administrative user, but we'll also set that user so that it doesn't have the permission to log into the cloud server. So it's a Windows admin user. You just can't log in and be that user. So when you're going through your update operation or whatever, and the ACL pops up and it wants administrative permissions, you have the credentials to give the system so that it can complete the operation, but we're not having you log in as the Windows administrator. And that way we kind of protect the system from something happening, you know, during normal operation. You know, we can expand it beyond that, but approaching it that way generally handles, whatever needs to be done.
Good, good. That's much more better said than I could have said it. Thank you. Thank you for that. Eva, I want to be respectful of, you are a host, so thank you for that. I want to be respectful of your time and everyone also present here. We're happy to stay on for overtime past the 1 hour. But if anyone needs to go, needs to leave, we respect that. Any other questions we're happy to address.
Yeah, I think we can probably close out. Your information is on the screen, so should anybody have any questions, they can reach out to y'all. And yeah, absolutely, if you have any Acctivate specific questions, Mendelson and Noobeh are absolutely able to answer those because of their experience with Acctivate. But if you feel like you want to ask Acctivate directly, feel free to reach out to our support team as well.
And John, you're asking the last question is about who do you contact about a quote. The easiest way is send an email to the email address that you see on the screen. Noobeh@MendelsonConsulting.com. No secret, full disclosure, several people in our team will get that email, including primarily Joni and I, and Keith also gets it, and one more person gets it, an admin. So it'll be handled extremely swiftly. Send an email to that address, and that's the best way.
Well, great. So thank you so much, Mario and Joni, for giving us that overview on Noobeh. It's a fantastic product, and I know that a lot of our customers could definitely benefit from using it. So y'all have a good rest of your day.
Eva, thank you, and thanks everyone for great questions, great interactions. Thank you.